Istanbul, in 1929, deep inside the quiet archives of the Topkapi Palace in Turkey, scholars brushed the dust off a forgotten bundle. A fragile piece of gazelle skin emerged from the shadows. It was beautifully drawn, incredibly detailed, and completely impossible. When the sorting began, researchers expected to find the usual signatures of ancient empire, routine administrative logs, standard regional borders, or mundane imperial correspondence moving through the centuries. What they unrolled instead stopped the entire academic world in its tracks. What exactly did that map reveal? To find out, we have to look closer. Here at Echo Mysteries, we are deeply passionate about peeling back the layers of time to uncover the forgotten, hidden archaeology of our world. But unearthing these lost truths is a massive journey, and it's one we simply can't take alone. If you're as fascinated by the unexplained as we are, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this with a fellow history seeker, and subscribing to our channel. Your support is the true compass that guides our work. It gives us the genuine motivation and resources we need to keep digging into the shadowed corners of the ancient past. What do you think they found drawn on that impossible piece of gazelle skin? Drop a comment below with your theories, and let's keep the echo of history alive together. The hands holding that piece of history belonged to German theologian Gustav Adolf Deissmann and the director of the Turkish National Museum, Dr. Halil Edhem. They were simply cataloguing neglected antiquities to convert the sprawling Topkapi Palace into a modern museum. They gently flattened the stiff parchment under the dim light of the archive room. It was a Portolan chart, a specialized map used by sailors to navigate safely. The ancient ink was severely faded, and the fragile edges were torn, yet the intricate lines drawn meticulously across the cured gazelle skin were absolutely unmistakable. This was not a crude medieval sketch filled with imagined borders. It was a sophisticated, mathematically precise rendering of the physical globe. The elegant signature at the bottom corner belonged to Admiral Piri Reis, a legendary commander of the formidable Ottoman fleet. He had crafted this cartographic masterpiece in the year 1513, compiling fragmented data from dozens of older source maps to serve a massive empire. The Ottoman Empire was at the absolute height of its power, commanding the Mediterranean with unmatched maritime supremacy. Piri Reis charted the western coast of Africa with extreme accuracy. He plotted the eastern coastline of South America. His precision rivaled modern satellite imaging. The longitude coordinates were practically perfect and the geographical proportions were structurally flawless. This level of cartographic intelligence was startling for the 16th century, demonstrating a profound understanding of global navigation. But here is where the map defies explanation. As researchers traced the coastline of South America downward, the ink did not stop at the tip of the continent. The landmass abruptly curved eastward into a massive, detailed continent. Piri Reis had deliberately drawn a vast land completely free of ice, mapping intricate mountain ranges and deep valleys. He documented winding rivers and a thriving terrestrial ecosystem in a place currently locked beneath miles of frozen wasteland. What could explain an Ottoman admiral mapping a continent that humanity supposedly had not even discovered yet? The implications of these ink strokes are cataclysmic for our orthodox understanding of human history and the physical world. They correspond to an ancient geological epoch when the southern polar region was entirely devoid of its glacial shield. This suggests that the source materials Piri Reis utilized were surviving remnants of an incomprehensible and forgotten era. They were navigational blueprints left behind by a phantom civilization possessing global mapping capabilities thousands of years ago. The linear timeline of human progress fractures, and the dust in Istanbul revealed an apocalyptic rupture in civilization. If the discoveries in Istanbul opened a terrifying door, French mathematician Orontius Phineas pushed the confusion to its peak. In 1531, He published a world map that eventually sent modern researchers into a spiral of disbelief. The visual evidence presented on his parchment was staggering. Across the bottom of the southern hemisphere, Phineas carefully drew a massive, continuous landmass. He boldly named it Terra Australis. It was not just a vague, ghostly outline, or a careless smudge of ink. He meticulously detailed intricate mountain ranges cutting across the interior. He sketched vast river valleys winding toward the sea. He illustrated deep coastal estuaries perfectly matching the subglacial topography of the real Antarctica. Alternative historians and modern conspiracy theorists immediately seized upon this specific document. They viewed these intricate ink strokes as undeniable physical proof of an advanced, lost civilization. They visualized ancient cartographers sailing across the globe and mapping a temperate world long before the last ice age ended. This theoretical excitement reached a fever pitch in the mid-20th century. In 1966, a prominent author named Charles Hapgood published a controversial book regarding maps of ancient sea kings. Hapgood confidently declared that the Phineas map depicted a completely ice-free Antarctica from exactly 11.600 years ago. He argued that highly advanced ancient mariners navigated these shores long before mainstream history even acknowledges the dawn of human agriculture. People eagerly embraced the idea of a forgotten golden age. The public imagination was thoroughly hijacked by the thought of ancient ships charting a warm, habitable southern pole. But here is where the story deepens. The academic world struck back with devastating, unforgiving precision. Modern paleoclimatology completely dismantled this captivating ice-free hypothesis. Mainstream scientists extracted deep, ancient ice cores directly from the Antarctic sheet. Their geological findings were absolute and undeniable. There was simply no point in time 11.600 years ago, when the southern continent was entirely free of its massive glacial shield. The freezing process actually happened millions of years earlier. Archival analysis of historical map libraries delivered the final, fatal blow. The Terra Australis drawn by Phineas was never real. It was merely a beautiful illusion born directly from the ancient Greek philosophy of geographical symmetry. Classical Greek scholars philosophically believed a massive southern continent strictly had to exist to physically balance the heavy landmasses of the northern hemisphere. Phineas simply drew exactly what he assumed must logically be there. The winding rivers were completely imagined. The towering mountains were purely theoretical. The ice-free utopia never actually existed. The ancient mariner fantasy was utterly shattered. The geological science is absolute. The beautiful map is just a ghost. The Southern Ocean is an unforgiving wasteland of crushing pressure and freezing darkness. For centuries, it remained a terrifying void on the absolute edge of human comprehension. To survive its violent waters required unprecedented technological resilience and absolute madness. In the bitter, unforgiving cold of 1820, a Russian expedition led by explorer Fabian von Bellingshausen pushed fragile wooden ships through a deadly labyrinth of lethal icebergs. American sealer Nathaniel Palmer was also desperately navigating these cataclysmic weather conditions. Their canvas sails were frozen completely solid in the brutal winds. Their timber hulls were relentlessly battered by freezing waves. Exhausted, shivering, and entirely cut off from the civilized world, the desperate crews finally stared into a seemingly infinite, towering wall of white. It was the massive, unbroken ice shelf of the southern extreme. Mainstream historical records officially cement this exact moment as a monumental triumph of human endurance. It is universally documented as the very first time in the entire recorded history of humanity that human eyes definitively saw the continent of Antarctica. The vast, blank spaces on the world map were finally complete. The ultimate, most hostile frontier was officially conquered by modern grit and naval superiority. Our academic Textbooks confidently declare this specific year as the definitive dawn of polar discovery. The historical timeline is fixed. The naval heroes are officially named. The orthodox narrative of global exploration is perfectly sealed. But here is where the official timeline completely collapses. Place the grueling, violent reality of the 1820 expedition next to the quiet archives of the 16th century. The dates simply do not align. Admiral Piri Reis confidently inked his intricate map in 1513. Orontius Phineas published his staggering global projection in 1531. That massive discrepancy leaves an incomprehensible chronological void of exactly 3 entire centuries. 300 years before Bellingshausen ever risked his crew in the freezing waters. Ancient cartographers were already casually drawing the continent. They were not braving the deadly ice. They were sitting in comfortable studies, copying from even older, long-forgotten source documents. The math is brutal and unforgiving. How could they possibly draw something that humanity would not officially see for another 300 years? Who originally provided the highly accurate measurements for a landmass locked in complete isolation? How did the precise curvature of the southern coastline end up on a piece of faded parchment centuries before the first wooden hull ever shattered against the polar ice? The traditional story of human progress tells us that we slowly pushed the boundaries of the known world step by painful step. We celebrate the bold explorers of the 19th century as the absolute pioneers of the unknown. Yet the physical ink on these ancient maps quietly mocks that linear narrative. It suggests a terrifying alternative. It suggests that someone else had already been there. Someone else had already mapped the entire globe with terrifying precision, and they left their impossible blueprints behind. Long before our official history even bothered to begin. The forgotten maritime archives hidden deep within the old world. Hidden within dusty European monastic vaults. Another staggering cartographic anomaly quietly exists. Generations of early navigators carefully preserved these extremely delicate Portolan charts. They are meticulously drawn on cured animal hides with rich, fading pigments. The visual construction of these specific documents is breathtakingly precise. Complex webs of rum lines intersect perfectly across the parchment. Beautifully illustrated compass roses dictate the exact directional flow of ancient winds. They perfectly outline the familiar, rugged curves of the European and African coastlines. Every jagged peninsula and hidden Mediterranean cove is documented flawlessly. These were the ultimate navigational tools for early ocean explorers. Sailors trusted these exact lines to survive treacherous ocean currents. They clearly represent a civilization perfectly in tune with its immediate naval surroundings. The mathematical geometry required to project a spherical Earth onto flat parchment is complex. It demands an advanced understanding of spherical trigonometry and global positioning systems. Yet these anonymous draftsmen executed the mathematics with absolute, terrifying perfection. They successfully built a flawless visual grid of the known oceanic world. The sheer craftsmanship alone demonstrates a maritime society at its intellectual peak. The faded ink boldly crosses into the terrifying dark void of the Atlantic, but none of that is the deepest mystery. Follow the faded ink across the Western Oceanic Divide. You will find massive landmasses completely foreign to classical European history. Intricate river systems are carved deeply into entirely unmapped continental interiors. Giant mountain ranges perfectly parallel the western coastlines of completely uncharted territories. These ancient maps visually describe the brutal topographical reality of incredibly distant continents. They clearly show distinct glacial features and highly complex inland waterways. They accurately illustrate the geological structure of lands now heavily buried under ice. The drawn coordinates perfectly mirror modern satellite imaging of hidden subglacial landscapes. The sheer volume of accurate topographical data is completely incomprehensible. It completely defies the traditional narrative of isolated ancient civilizations. A medieval sailor could never measure the interior of a frozen continent. A Renaissance monk could never calculate the longitude of a buried mountain. The tools required for this extreme level of global surveying simply did not exist. There were no orbiting satellites or advanced aerial radar systems. There were obviously no deep ice penetrating sonar technologies available to these ancient draftsmen, yet the physical ink remains permanently and undeniably stained onto the animal skin. The plotted mountain ridges and precise coastal curves are simply mathematically undeniable. This visual evidence forces a terrifying re-evaluation of our shared planetary heritage. These maps are not the creative imaginations of bored medieval artists. They are the physical echoes of an entirely forgotten global mapping project. They are merely fragmented copies derived from a highly advanced master source. An unknown civilization surveyed this entire planet with terrifying clinical accuracy. They mapped the Earth before the ice completely swallowed the northern hemisphere. Then they vanished into the absolute dark of prehistoric time, leaving only these silent navigational ghosts behind. The high Arctic, another fragile, crumbling piece of parchment, pulled from the forgotten shadows of a private European collection. The faded ink carefully traces the harsh, brutal coastlines of the extreme North Atlantic. It maps out dangerous fjords, deep bays, and winding coastal straits with absolute mathematical precision. Early sailors venturing into these freezing, unpredictable waters would have relied heavily on these exact outlines to avoid being completely crushed by shifting ice flows. The physical craftsmanship of this document is completely flawless. It perfectly captures the rugged shores of northern Europe and the scattered, lonely islands of the freezing sea. Every single drawn detail suggests a master cartographer who fully understood the violent, unforgiving nature of the northern oceans. It stands as a brilliant, undeniable display of historical geography. The map clearly documents a highly organized maritime route through the absolute worst weather conditions on Earth. But look closer at the extreme upper left corner of the animal skin. We move further west into the deep, terrifying void of the Arctic Circle. The intricate lines begin to trace the massive, dominating landmass we now recognize today as Greenland. Our modern satellite imagery simply depicts this region as a singular, colossal island heavily buried underneath a permanent, crushing sheet of white glacier. But here is where the parchment becomes truly terrifying. The ancient, anonymous cartographer did not draw a single, solid mass of ice. The dark ink clearly and deliberately separates the vast territory into several distinct, separate islands divided by deep, winding ocean waterways. For many centuries, traditional historians quickly dismissed this specific geographical detail as a careless creative error or a pure mythological fantasy. There was absolutely no visual evidence of these dividing rivers anywhere on the actual surface. The entire region is permanently locked under 2 miles of solid, impenetrable ice. Then modern scientific technology finally caught up to the ancient ink. In the later half of the 20th century, heavily funded polar expeditions utilized advanced ground-penetrating radar to look deep beneath the Greenland ice sheet. The complex seismic readings bounced back from the hidden bedrock and revealed a completely impossible truth. The ancient, dismissed map was actually entirely correct. Deep beneath the massive, suffocating glacial weight, the land is actually a complex archipelago of separate landmasses completely fractured by deep subglacial canyons. The ancient drawing perfectly matches the hidden geological reality of the buried bedrock. How could any historical draftsman possibly know the exact geological structure of an archipelago completely hidden beneath millions of tons of prehistoric ice? Nobody in the entire recorded medieval world possessed the sophisticated technology to physically see straight through a glacier, yet the precise, undeniable lines remain permanently etched onto the fragile document. It is another silent, haunting echo from an advanced, forgotten human era. The shifting sands of the Far East, another incomprehensible cartographic artifact, completely shatters our traditional understanding of ancient Asian exploration. The magnificent map in question is a sprawling, beautifully complex document carefully preserved by imperial dynasties. It was drawn with delicate brushstrokes, showcasing a highly sophisticated understanding of regional trade routes, massive mountain ranges, and deep river basins. The artists painstakingly detailed the bustling coastal ports of a thriving Asian empire, a society operating at the absolute zenith of its cultural and economic power. The geometric grid system employed to map the vast interior territories is nothing short of breathtaking. It clearly demonstrates a profound mathematical grasp of topographical surveying. Hundreds of intricate city nodes are perfectly connected by well-documented trade arteries, forming a beautiful web of ancient commerce. For decades, traditional historians confidently categorized this spectacular map as the ultimate geographical achievement of early imperial ambition. It was simply the proud, visual declaration of a powerful society mapping its immediate surroundings. But then, the visual narrative on the ancient silk violently shifts. The delicate brushstrokes suddenly abandon the familiar, documented territories of the Asian continent. They stretch incredibly far to the east, violently crossing the vast, terrifying expanse of the Pacific Ocean, long before any European galleon ever dared to navigate those punishing waters. This map quietly documents something impossible. It accurately traces the rugged, heavily forested coastlines of the North American continent. The ancient Asian draftsman mapped the intricate western coastal inlets, the deep natural harbors, and the massive, dominating mountain ranges with cataclysmic precision. They successfully detailed topographical features separated by thousands of miles of incredibly hostile open ocean. This represents a geographical achievement that completely defies explanation. Classical historical models dictate that these two distinct continents remained completely isolated for millennia. They confidently state that the vast Pacific served as an impassable, deadly barrier until the dawn of modern European colonialism, yet the faded ink simply ignores those academic limitations. The drawn American coastlines are not vague, mythological guesses or artistic flourishes. They represent the devastating reality of a direct, physical survey. The precise curvature of the depicted bays perfectly matches modern topographical data. The accurate placement of major river mouths is completely undeniable. How did an ancient imperial cartographer sitting in a distant court possibly acquire the exact geological measurements of a continent hidden across the largest ocean on Earth? The logistics required to launch, supply, and return an oceanic surveying fleet across the Pacific are staggering. The absolute survival rate for such a prehistoric expedition would be statistically zero. Our official history books boldly claim that the grand age of global discovery was strictly a European invention. But this silent, fragile document suggests a completely different, almost terrifying reality. It suggests an incredibly advanced maritime network operating quietly in the shadows of prehistory. A forgotten global civilization possessed the incomprehensible technology to systematically measure the entire Earth, leaving us with only these shattered, impossible fragments to desperately piece together. A heavily guarded subterranean archive hidden beneath the cobblestone streets of Western Europe. Another fragile piece of history emerges from the crushing weight of academic obscurity. This final cartographic anomaly is a massive, beautifully preserved global planisphere. It was drafted meticulously by an anonymous hand during the very dawn of the Renaissance. The faded ink brilliantly illustrates the known continents with staggering, artistic precision. The coastal borders are rendered flawlessly. The artist utilized a highly complex mathematical grid to project the spherical globe onto flat parchment with incredible accuracy. Early navigators and royal scholars revered these specific documents as the absolute pinnacle of human geography and exploration. They represented the crowning intellectual achievement of a society finally waking up from the long dark ages. The sheer scale of the geographical data collected here is completely breathtaking, reflecting a civilization expanding maritime borders. The lines are deliberate, the measurements are absolute, but look closely at the mathematical coordinates anchoring the edges. The ancient draftsmen did not just estimate the distances, they calculated the exact longitudinal positions of uncharted shorelines. They confidently charted the exact width of the terrifying, open oceans and plotted the precise coordinates of islands. The classical historical timeline explicitly tells us this level of calculation is completely impossible for that specific era. The reliable measurement of global longitude absolutely required the invention of the marine chronometer, a technology not yet invented. A medieval scholar could never accurately calculate the exact longitudinal drop of a distant continent with primitive tools. The primitive navigational tools of the era were completely useless for this specific, monumental task. The math is brutal. The timeline is fractured, and this is where the final artifact becomes truly terrifying, hiding the deepest mystery. When modern cartographers overlaid this ancient grid with contemporary satellite topography, a cataclysmic truth emerged from the ink. The map does not depict the modern coastlines. The faded ink traces the continental shelves of the last ice age. It clearly shows massive, sweeping land bridges connecting separate continents across the ocean floor in ancient times. It accurately illustrates vast coastal plains that are currently buried under hundreds of feet of violent, crushing seawater. The rising oceans violently swallowed these ancient lands thousands of years ago. Entire prehistoric ecosystems were completely erased. Yet the ancient draftsmen accurately mapped this submerged world before the glacial melt completely redrew the planet. Who was sailing the freezing oceans and mathematically measuring the continents while humanity was supposedly still hunting? The physical evidence is permanently stained onto the animal skin, staring blindly back at us. These ancient maps are not the humble beginnings of human exploration, they are the surviving, fragmented blueprints of an incomprehensible, forgotten global empire, across fragmented continents and lost centuries. From that single dust-covered roll of gazelle skin hidden within the silent archives of Istanbul to the deepest subglacial canyons of the freezing south. These impossible documents whisper the exact same terrifying truth. They represent the scattered, physical ashes of a highly advanced, forgotten epoch that systematically measured our entire planet long before the crushing ice violently reshaped its global oceans. The linear timeline of human progress we boldly teach in our modern classrooms is completely fractured by these surviving, undeniable strokes of faded medieval ink. Are we truly the absolute pinnacle of human geographical discovery? Or are we simply the arrogant, amnesiac survivors wandering blindly through the ruined blueprints of a far greater global empire?